my first saltwater experience, which I still remember to this day, was fishing for the European sea bass. And the European sea bass is actually a relative of the striped bass. Two differences, no, three actually. One, no stripes. Second, the size, teeny. Third, the population, terrible. Believe it or not, but in Europe, commercial fishermen are allowed to catch the European sea bass when they are on the bed, when they reproduce, which I guess for most of us, if not all of us, seems to be something absolutely crazy, but that's what it is. So as a result, the fishing, in good English, S-U-C-K-S in French. So, thank you very much. All right, but in every tough situation, there's always some benefit. Always. You just have to open your eyes about what the benefits are or can be. And actually, one of the benefits of fishing in tough water means, as a designer, well, there's a logo I think around here, and somewhere it says 1976. Well, I'm not kidding. The first lure I designed, I was 8 years old. And since my first lure worked, I got fish on, then that gave me the confidence that, hey, if I have some idea, maybe I can create another lure, and that's why I started quite early, and it ended up to be, well, my fishing career. So I'm guessing at least some of you, maybe all of you, I don't know, knows my previous brand and company, Sebile, with the baits like the Magic Swimmer or the Stick Shad. But of course, when I was 8, I have no clue that something will happen like this, that I will be able to make a living and my baits will sell tens of millions around the world. So, but here I am today, and thanks to those tough times fishing on the French shores with small population of fish, I have to find ways to catch fish, and I have to find ways of designing lure that have a good action that will turn the bite on, but also to find lure that we're able to cover more water. And that will be one of the key things I will develop to you this morning, is about the distance. Because, when you have the chance to find a big school of fish and you have the feeding frenzy, I mean, we know that any lure, any possible lure will catch a fish. So the issue is not that much to catch fish when they are there, plentiful and biting like crazy. But it's, that will last maybe half hour. You still have 7 or 8 hours of fishing in front of you. And that's where some lures can help you to succeed better. And that's what I hope I can say I've been striving, was to succeed in developing lures that are really very good, very strong fish catchers by their actions. And that's what we're gonna see right here in the water right now. And also for some of them, by the way I designed them, basically to cover more distance. The distance is really a big thing, because we all know there's always that 1 to 10 situations where whatever you cast, you're always 20 feet shorter. So when indeed you can have a lure that truly makes a longer cast, where you can reach fish that are more far away, you can cover more water, and basically covering more water by the end of the day means more bites and very likely more fish landing. And some of my lures I've designed that are here because of that. All right, so as I'm talking about the distance, of course, we're in that tank. This gentleman is in front of me. So I guess if I try to show how far my lure go, he will not be very happy, right? so of course I cannot demonstrate, but I will speak to you about a few things that really help some of the lures. So some of the lure I designed, as you can see here, they have wings on the sides. The wings actually help not that much when the lure is in the air, a little bit, but that's not the key point. But they help me to have some of the lure being heavier, and when they are heavier, actually, you have a higher density in the lure. I know it's a bit technical, but the result of that is with the same casting action, the lure can get a higher speed. And when the lure gets a higher speed, well, actually, it flies longer in the air, it pulls longer the line, Every piece of line that goes out of the reel adds more weight and more drag in the air when the lure flies in the air, and that's part of why when we cast and the bell goes down and suddenly the line breaks, we all know that the lure flies at an incredible distance without the line? Well, one of the key reasons is because there's not the line and there's not that drag behind the lure. So having lures that are heavier really helps for a longer distance, not just heavier, denser. Because if you have a very heavy but floating lure, actually what happens is when the lure is in the air, the lure has a lot of air resistance. A lure that floats means that's a lure that have a density that is lower than the water. The water have a 1 density. That means you have 1 kg, I know here we talk about pounds and inches, but the basics are you have 1 kg, which is 2.2 pounds for basically a cube of 10 centimeter by 10 and by 10. So it turned out when you have something that's heavier, than when you have something that's denser than that, actually you definitely have less drag when the lure goes in the air, and that's what helps you. So for example, here's one of the bait I designed with that mindset. For those of you who knew my previous stick shad with sebile, that was one of the best selling lure I made because that lure can do a lot of things for you guys. You can just cast and have a steady retrieve, you can jerk it, you can walk the dog, you can let it fall, especially the sinking or extra heavy models, and they have a way of rolling on the fall that's extremely attractive. So with the mindset of long distance and still having all those possibilities, I designed this guy that's named the Flying Crusher. You know, obviously a name flying is related to the fact that's a very good lure when it comes to reach long distance. So a few things that helps lures, at least some of my lures, to achieve longer distance. What you can see below the belly, you see there are ribs. And the ribs below the belly, honestly, it's not a gimmick. It's a big deal. Why? Well, because when you cast the lure in the air, again, that's the one thing I cannot show in the tank. And once again, I promise I'm going to start swimming the bait in the water. But when you cast any lure, when they fly in the air, because the balance of the lure is made where the weight are below the belly for 99% of the lures, the hard lures at least. When they fly in the air and they fall down, about 80% of the air resistance goes through the belly. And when you have the ribs right here, what happens is very simple. It creates very teeny turbulences. And the turbulence are what? It's just a little, swirl from the air. But as a result, instead of just having purely the air having friction with the lure itself, when it goes to the belly here with the ribs, it creates many turbulence. So actually the air have friction against the air. And that's definitely less than having the friction directly against the plastic body. So that's a very simple thing. So it really helps. So many of my lures, you can see here, for example, the Flying Pencil, have also that feature. That really helps. The other thing, it does help once the lure is in the water, you have a better water flow. When the lure swims, when you have the action that you intend the lure to have, most of the lures, well, the belly are just flat, right? So when the lure works, there's a bit more resistance when the lure is in the water. So actually those ribs simply allow also the water to flow better. So actually you have a teeny bit better swim action, a more realistic swim action when using a bait that does have that. So let's start with this one guy. So they told me here at Kittery I have the right of 3% casualties. So you can come, many of you, if 100 of you guys are around, I'm only allowed to hook 3 of you. I don't promise I will not hook anyone, but I'm going to try at least, right?
Interesting.
All right, so you can see right here in the tank. So please come closer so you'll be able to see the action. Of course, a very simple and logical say right here is that we're in a short tank, the water is still, obviously that's not the typical fishing conditions, but at least I will give you a bit of an idea. So this guy, the Flying Crusher, first make very long cast, okay? I'm going back there, but really it's made for that. The good density flies very well in the air. About the design of the body itself, what you can notice is actually the tail is a bit more flat, but the tail is a bit wider than the front part of it. So as a result, when you retrieve it, it helps to glide in the water in a teeny bit erratic motion. Because here's the thing, I'm sure many of you have seen that once or maybe many times. Sometimes you retrieve a lure and you can see a fish swimming behind the lure and the fish not biting. Most of the time, if you pay attention, you will see that most of the time when fish follow but do not bite the lure, it's because the lure has what I call a very mechanical action, where the swim action is just the same. Like some walking bait, which overall works great, but sometimes they just go like right, left, and you can see a fish following, 10, 15, 20 feet, not biting. So that's where, or by the anger, by your own hand, the way you manage the rod and the reel, and you kind of kill a bit that mechanical action to make that more lifelike. But here, that's a design that automatically will do that. Even if you have a straight silver retrieve, you will see that bait don't just swim exactly the same way. You're actually a bit unsure the way, or the exact way the bait will swim. And that's why it's part of why this bait here is really interesting. You see it has that kind of S action. When you cast and you let it fall, you can notice there's a little bit of roll on the fall. Actually, that's part of what makes that bait a very, very good bait. Because not only you can cast and retrieve the bait, but sometimes you just can make a long pull and let it fall. Just with a little bit slack line, and you have that kind of rolling action. Let me show you again, for those of you here on the back. So, this may seem a teeny thing, but that actually gives life. Many sinking lure, when they sink, they simply go straight. And sometimes you have some bites, but just the fact that the way that bait is designed and tuned, the fact you have that little bit of action on the fall really is very, very efficient and get through many bites. Now, that's also a lure you can work fast. And with that kind of stop and go motion, again, we're not in true fishing situation, but that still gives you some decent idea of what the bait can do. So one of the things is that have the stop and go motion. What means stop and go? Well, usually it's very simple. Crank a few times, make a pause. Crank a few times, make a pause. And that's one of those techniques that's very simple and very efficient. So you see, the action of this bait is not just exactly the same all the time. And actually, one of the benefits and one of the differences between this very bait and the stick shad is that the stick shad has the type of action it has because I put a keel underneath the belly. But this guy, I didn't want just to come and say, okay, I'm going to just copy my previous lure and make a new one with my new brand. No, I wanted to have that lure being able to do more. And what you can see is the front part of the lure, the sheen right here at the belly, is quite flat. So thanks to that, one thing you can do with the flying crusher is actually you can use that bait as top water, especially when you have a fast action, when fish are moving fast, or even when they are not moving fast, but sometimes when they are attracted to bait fish or to lures moving fast. And in that case, heeling fast enough, you can bring the bait, you see, to work also on the top. There are some situations where actually, even if you don't see action, the fact to move a bait fast is really important. I will give you one example, but I had that example dozens of times in my life. I mean, I've fished many places. I've been fishing 72 countries in my life. I was guiding in Africa for 18 years, guiding for myself and for many people, many worker fish. And I want to like that because sometimes you have to do something that may go against what typically you're used to do. And the situation I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you one example. Maybe some of you have seen some of the TV show I shot with Larry Dalbert, I don't know, 10 years, dozen years ago. I was in Cape Cod fishing for big stripers. And what we found on those 3 days was the fish, the stripers, were like 40 or 50 feet deep. Not active, we can see them on the screen. And you can jig a soft plastic, a jig, there was almost no bites. For some reason, the ticket was to cast my big lures, at the time my big magic swimmer, but burning as fast as we can on the top. Which is not the typical way that you think when it comes to straight bass. But you know what? It was a ticket. The result was in 3 days, we caught exactly 156 stripers. The best one was 46 pounds. So I'm not talking of 146 or 56, teeny guys. I'm talking of real fish. And they were not active. And if you will swim a bait, a lure, a bit too slow, they have no interest into that. So that's why what I just showed you, of course in a tank, might be a bit insignificant, but in certain situations, think about that. You have no bite, you may think, maybe there's no fish, maybe there are fish, they don't want to feed. Yeah, true, but maybe give a try, now and then. and make some casts like this where you just burn your bait, make that massive trace on the top, where you have that weight, and actually in some case that turn the fish on. It's not only stripers. Pike, for example, I grew up in France. Pike is, well, typically in freshwater, that is the most popular between for myself, fish fishing. The pike is the same. Sometimes, I'm not saying it's like all the time, but sometimes you have a tough day, you're trying all kind of lures. I mean, I was designer for Meps and Mr. Twister. I guess some of you have been using, say, Mep spinners, in freshwater especially. Well, sometimes that's the same thing. You don't have bites, or very few bites, with the lure that most of the time works good, with the action that most of the time works well. Well, sometimes you have to just go very fast. And that's one of the benefits of this guy right here. Work it fast, and you make a great weight on the top. So that's why I really love that bait. It's the kind of bait I really recommend because I use it myself, not just because I'm a designer. I'm not here saying, hey, buy. Well, first of all, I do those things because that's my passion. Passion I turn indeed into a job. So every single lure I design it for myself for good reason when it comes to fishing. And as a result here, you have a lure that helps you to make a long cast, to have a lot of different type of action, and basically that's a lure you can use in many situations. You can work it pretty slow also. That's one of the benefits of the design. You see? In that case, look, we're talking of a relatively heavy lure, and I still can work it very slow. So that's definitely one lure that's quite interesting, and I know they do carry this lure right here at Kittery. Alright, so still talking about the baits that have something that's a bit special when it comes to distance. I want to stay on my brand that's saying, and if you want to pass the lure, you can have a closer look, of course, so go right down.
It's changing.
Right, this guy right here, the flying pencil. Well, there are countless pencil baits, right, on the market. I'm sure all of you have, what, 6, maybe a dozen, maybe 2 dozen pencils. And there are many that are good, definitely. What makes a difference here is, well, the design, having those ribs, having those wings on the side. Again, it's something that helps because, yeah, it helps for distance, and it gives a plus to that. So, the ribs in that case, so let's start with the big one. So that's 160, there's obviously 2 sizes. So 160 is about 6.5 inch long, and there's the 110 which is 4 inches and a quarter. So one of the benefits of using the flying pencil is that the wings on the side give it a bit more lift and also help to make a bigger wave. So again, if you want to catch the attention from fish, definitely the weight is one of the things that helps. Now, the way I designed this guy, I made sure that was not just a bait. You cannot just the steady, typical retrieve. Of course, you can do that, but also what you can see here, even working pretty slow in that case, the wings give that teeny bit more lift on the water. So you saw I work it very nicely and having a nice rocking the dog action. The wider or longer walking the dog action than typically other pencil will have, and the wings help into that regard. And of course, just to mention that, any of you, you're very welcome right now to ask me any question. We can talk after demonstration, but if you have question now, just don't lose. That's a great opportunity for me and for you. I hope that we're all together, and if you have any idea, question, please don't hesitate. Come with them. Now, when I spoke about a bigger weight, it's also true when you want to have a faster retrieve where you simply work the bait straight, like this. So when you compare just with a similar bait, but you have the wings, well, you can see you have probably a 20 to 25% wider weight. So it's about signal, the fish can see their prey, but also one very important thing is actually what's called the lateral line, which is a natural radar that's on the side of every fish, pretty much every fish. They have very tiny holes actually in their scales, in their skin, and there's like a little air that looks like that actually capture the water pressure. And that's why for most fish, before they see the lure, the bait that they think is their next meal, they actually feed it with their lateral line. And that's why it's really important to create a number of vibration movements in the water, because very often you capture the attention of the fish thanks to a lateral line before even they see the bait. Many studies have been made on the vast majority of fish that prove one thing, is that the eyes are really used by fish to finalize the bite more than anything else. So very often they are attracted, they feel the presence of the prey, they go after the prey, but really their eyes are real tools when it comes to bite. And some of the most incredible things and studies that I've seen were, what about fish that are blind? Not naturally, fish that turn to be blind for many reasons, including sometimes a hook. I mean, we know that sometimes you catch a fish and the hook goes through the eye, right? Well, those fish still survive. And why can they survive? Because they can feed. They can feed because their lateral line is key much more than their eyes. So that's 160. Now, here's the teeny guy. So you might be a bit surprised why having one treble hook, not two, you know. On a bigger one, it's kind of obvious, but typically when you look for a smaller bait, you also find two treble hooks. Well, here's what was my point. Again, I designed lures not because I want to sell them, but because I see the need, and I see what can I do to bring something better to my design. Well, because when you have a bait of this size and you have two treble hooks, you're going to have definitely smaller treble hooks. And smaller treble hooks mean one thing. Sure, you have 6 hook points. So if you have a small fish that didn't bite very well, there's more chance with that small fish. But what happens when you have good, solid, big, huge fish sometimes feeding on small prey? What does happen? Well, then you have the risk that one of those 6 hooks, because the treble hook is together 3 teeny or medium-sized single hooks, right? So the risk is that one of those hooks, the one hook that's hooked in the fish mouth or jaw or cheek, well, maybe that hook will open, and as a result, you lose the fish. So I choose on purpose to come only with one hook, but definitely a bigger size hook. So thanks to that, you know, if it's a decent fish, not even a giant, the fish is going to swallow this lure, pretty much sure, right? But now you can rely, you have definitely a bigger hook. So this guy is a 4" and a quarter. It's a sinking model. We actually have a few different options. Sinking, we have some that are heavier. We have some also with single hook, called the rockets. When you really want something heavy, but that's the one you will use in many situations, especially if you use, you know, a typical light or medium light rod, anywhere between, I would say, 16 to 15 pound test. 3%. So what you can notice here, this guy is a sinking model. So I choose not to come with a floating for one reason, or 2 reasons. But the first one was that actually, when I made the floating prototype, it was 2 grams lighter than this guy. For 2 grams, we go back in my original explanation, for 2 little grams, literally, I added 25% in distance. Not just 2 or 3 feet, you know, 2 feet, who cares? 25% longer cast, just for 2 grams. 1 gram is about what, 1/32 of an ounce. It's very teeny, right? So for a very teeny change, I found that I was definitely giving a great edge in terms of distance. And again, we go back into longer distance, reach fish that are far away, cover more water. Also casting better in the wind. When it's windy, well, if your lure have a higher density, it does cast better, goes through the air much better. But also the fact that this guy is sinking, even if it's a slow sinking, there's not a lot of weight into it, actually adds better action. And that's what we just know. So you still can work this guy on the top. So you can have your kind of walking the dog action. You can have a faster retrieve, as I show you a little bit before. And you see, and you can have the rod tip down, which I'm doing now because the tank is quite short, but when you're in reaction, you still can do that with the rod tip down, but also with the rod tip up. Alright? But also the other thing is that because it's a bit sinking, this bait also can be worked like this. And as you can see, now you have something that's more erratic, and that's part of also having more options more options in your case. One of the funny thing I found, and I remember because I started to realize that when I was guiding in Africa, obviously different fish, different temperature too, but you know what, at the end, fish behavior are pretty much the same in many places. You just have different fish species, and some have same or similar type of reactions and behaviors, and some other type have other types of. And one thing I started to realize that became more and more obvious was, you know what? Sometimes you have a lure that's exactly working on the top, and you have just a few bites. And you have a lure that simply works like 1 or 2 inches below the surface, and you have not 1 or 2 more bites. You may have like 5 times more bites. I know, it sounds crazy, but that's one of the benefits of being a guy, being on the water for more than 300 days, a year, for a pretty significant percent of my life, is to be able to do those tests and pay attention to those things. That certainly makes a big change. So having the chance here that you have a lure that's top water, but certainly you can turn it into a twitch bait, is the kind of situation that gives you an edge, where you really can bring more bites and land more fish thanks to that. So again, last cast with this guy. So you see, not only I can work this guy on top, but you just slow it down a little bit, and now you have a beautiful twitching bait that just works, just a few inches below the surface. So that's the flying pencil and sinking. That's 4.25 inches in length.
You said 25% more distance.
Yes.
What weight line?
With any line, and that's what's interesting. Taking a line in the range of 6 pounds to 15 pounds. If you put 40 pounds, obviously that lure will have a hard time. But that's what's interesting. When I design any lure, I go through a number of tests and comparison tests. Because, it's easy to come with marketing BS, And honestly, I've been in the industry for more than 30 years now, and I saw a lot of press releases where you can tell the designer is just a dude behind the computer who don't really spend much time on the water. So when part of my test, especially when I have lures into which I want to bring features that really helps in terms of distance, I do the actual cast, I do the actual test of comparison. So for example, when I came with the prototype, very often I came with a number of prototypes. First, in the first development phase, but then when I fine-tune the type of prototypes, that's where I go. So this guy weighs exactly 28 grams. The floating one was simply 26. So you see, if you want to talk in terms of percentage, it's even less than 10%. It's like 6 or 7% difference. But when I did the test and I cast on the land, of course, that's why going back to your point, what kind of line, when I do the test, I make tests which make sense. So I don't recall at this very moment, but I surely use a line that was between the 6 and 15 pound test where a lure like this makes sense. So I was probably say with a 10 or 12 pound. And when I do the cast, every time, when I do one set of casts, I make 100 casts. So just to share with you the way I do in the design. So I make 100 casts and I record every single distance I reach. And typically what I do, I will remove the 5 shortest and the 5 longest. And that's just something that helps because when you make your cast, you just take 1 second, you have a little bit of wind in your back, and suddenly you have one cast that's much farther. Not because the cast was better, just because the wind helped you. Or in the other way around, the wind against you. So by making 100 casts, removing the 5 shortest, removing the 5 longest, taking the 90 casts and making an average, that gives me a number that I can use as a reference. And then that's why when I made the test with the floating, and then I went to the test with the sinking, 25% difference. So then you go like, okay, that's significant. It's not 1 or 2 feet. 1 or 2 feet, there will be no benefit, no use. And if I just go with a mindset of creating products for sale, people are so much used to buy floating ones that they may not want to buy a sinking one because what they are looking for is a floating one. But I choose still not to bring the floating because there was such a benefit of having a sinking one versus a floating that I take that as a proper challenge. And that's why I love when I have the chance to meet with people like you right here, right now, is because that's an opportunity for me to share these things. And those things, well, I think you can try by yourself, well, you don't have a prototype of a floating one in your hand. But if you take a top water lure, I guess many of you will have a top water lure of another brand, obviously, of the same length, but a floating one, give it a try. If you end up to like this guy, make a try to see by yourself, to experience by yourself. Cast not in the water. On the water, it's always a little bit difficult. Cast on the sand, cast on the grass. So you can put, like a stick or something in there, make a few casts. Start with the floating one first, and then you cast the sinking one after that. And then you will see that obviously by yourself, you will experience that because of given design and some choice made into the design definitely help. Actually, about the distance, one of the things that helps here is that also we have only one hook, because a treble hook, as you can notice, looks like pretty much an anchor for a boat, and that's what it is. When you cast a lure, any lure, in the air, well, you have some amount of drag. That's just part of what it is. So actually, having only one treble hook versus two, you actually have also a lure that have a little bit less drag when you cast that bait through the air. So that's, the end result of having a lure that makes longer cast, it's when you accumulate those different teeny benefits all together. So again, this guy here is a flying pencil 4" and 1/4. So let me see what else. Just want to make sure what else we have right here. Everything is good? Alright, so ocean-borne. Yeah, so this is Larry, my longtime friend who's working with me. Brent. Okay, yeah, so there's no ocean-borne. Well, there's hotels. Yeah. Alright. Okay, so about this brand, so ocean-borne is the brand I just showed you. The difference with my company today compared to my previous company, Sebile, is instead of putting all my lures within the same brand, I choose, in fact, to create several brands. So this way, every brand has a specific focus. Right? So obviously, the ocean-borne lure, that brand here, which I'll just show you a few of the baits, obviously is definitely dedicated to saltwater fishing, especially with our lure. And that's why to finish on that brand, I'm going to show you the two types of bucktails I designed. So, let me show with your hand, please. Who here is fishing at least sometimes with bucktail? Alright? So, but I guess everybody knows at least what a bucktail is, right? Bucktails? Yeah. Yeah, that's my Franglish. I'm sorry. They should give you a little book with Franglish translation.
Nobody can afford that book, Patrick. Nobody can afford the cost of that book.
Crap. So basically, bucktails, what are they? A piece of lead, a hook, some feathers, or some bucktails actually, mylar sometimes. Well, we honestly know those are part of the most attractive baits. They are very efficient. They are very efficient, but they have also some limitations. One of the attractions is their price. Sometimes, if you fish in a rocky place, you're like, do I go in that spot using a $25 lure or a $4 bucktail? I mean, that's definitely part of the consideration. But even if we don't think about their cost, they are definitely great fish catchers. And that's why I wanted to have bucktails myself. I just didn't want it just to come and say, okay, I'm going to do like everybody else. I was like, hey, can I do something that my bucktails will really have a better action, will also snag less than over, knowing that very often we may use bucktail where we do have rocks and snags. And that's why I ended up to come with two models, two shapes. One that's named the bouncing bucktail. So you see that one is a bit slender. It's attached on the top, on the back. You see? And thanks to that, it's very well balanced. The other one, well, in that case you see two different sizes, but if you look at the shape by itself, the other one is shorter. The attachment is more closer to the nose. And it's also wider. But one thing you can see in common into those two baits is that they do have wings on the sides. So you see here wings, and you see wings also there. So let's go with this guy first. So the bouncing bucktails have wings that are very much horizontal. They are parallel to the shape of the body. So you may wonder, what is the benefit of the wings right here? Well, several ones. One first benefit, and again, if you want to see, you need to be closer to the tank. But one benefit is that, look, you see, when that bait drops on bottom,
There you go.
the wings keep the hook up. So this way you're sure that the hook will always stay up. If you have a regular bucktail and you make a pause on the bottom, it's very likely that the hook will hold sideways and you may snag because of this. So first thing, the wing, keep the hook up. I'm going to cast for those who are more far away here. Thanks to that, you can rely that the bait will have that position. Secondly, the wings also add width to the bait. The width itself helps to deflect from the cover. Probably some of you fish largemouth bass sometimes. You probably know, I'm guessing, you know what are square bill crankbaits. Well, they use the fact they have a square bill to actually deflect against branches and rocks, and that's part of not only the action to catch largemouth, but also that's why you can cast a lure that actually most of them have 2 trap loops, and you snag very little because the deflection. So the deflection on the wings right here is directly right on spot. So even if you fish slow, because sometimes striper look to fit on a bait that works slow on the bottom, but also if you want to target flounders, if you like fishing flounder, that's one of the best, I promise you, that's one of the best choice you can pick is this bucktail. So that really matters for this. Now, I was also thinking, you know, when you take a bucktail, all the action the bucktail have is really what you do with your rod tip, right? Well, what can I do? That was my mindset. What can I do? That really, I bring my bucktail to another level. Well, again, the wings matter. Most of the wing, as you can see, is horizontal, but the front part goes up. That does matter. As a result, that's what it does. Look, when you jig this guy, you see what happened? Now you have a bucktail that does something that I'm pretty sure you've never seen before. Look at this. You can even hear the sound. Because when I jig it, you see now, that bucktail can glide. This one is probably a 3 ounce. When you jig that 3 ounce, and we start from 3/4, so just to let you know, we have 3/4, 1 ounce, 1.5, 2, 3, 4, and 5 maybe is the heaviest. But when you make that jigging action, you give momentum, you give energy actually, between your hand to your rod, through the line, and that energy reaches the lure. And when you jig it now, you give that momentum, you give that energy into the lure, and that's why, thanks to design, thanks to wings, that's why these guys, as you just saw, have that swivel motion. Look at this. Woo. If you fish, say, 20 feet, 30 feet of water, and you give a powerful jigging action and give the semi-slack line, that guy can glide as far as 10 feet away. So now, it's no longer simply a piece of land, it's really a lure by itself. And you can use it like this. And of course, you can put a trailer. We have some of our soft plastic, whether it's the dart spin with the blade, we're going to talk about this guy in a moment. This guy, which is named the Meanwhile, you know, I've also, another couple of soft baits that work just perfect for this guy. So that's why this one is named the bouncing bucktail. And that's the one you typically want if you want to fish closer to the bottom. Also, if you want to do vertical jigging, when you fish, say from a jetty or from a boat, if it's deep enough in front of you, simply when you let that guy drop, because the wings, it makes a circle on the way down, with you doing nothing. So when a regular jig, we just simply fall like this. This guy, no, we make a circle, we have action by itself, with you doing nothing. So you're efficient all the time. Also, a regular bucktail will just fold the head first and the hook will be straight behind. So this way, sometimes you miss some bites if the fish don't grab properly. But what you can see here, look at the way the bait sinks in the water thanks to the wings again. You see the position? It has just a small angle like 30%. So it has actually the position of a real bait fish. That means when the striper or the bluefish or tuna, they are great for tuna as well. When the fish comes to grab this guy, the bait have already right away a proper position. So you're more likely that the fish will be able to swallow properly the bait. And as a result, you have a much better chance for a good hookup. Now, one quick detail, which is not so much of a detail. It's the design of my hook right here. Well, I was 16 years old and I was in a blacksmith class. And my teacher was talking to us about wires and the way to bend the wires, the way wires react, where you strengthen wires and do all kind of things. That was part of that blacksmith course. And in the middle of the class, when he was talking of those wires and what happened depending on the way we bend them, I suddenly have that sparkle, like boom, fireworks on top of my head. I was like, the hooks got it wrong, most of them. That was really the way I felt at this very moment. Why? Because the regular shape hook, which is still used in many hooks, you know, here this is the bend, a normal, typical bend of most of the hooks, right? What happened? What happened when you, one day, in the middle of your fishing, suddenly you hook the striped bass of your life? You know, most of the time, for most people, they didn't know 1 second before they will hook the fish of a lifetime. And now you're hooked, and that fish is pulling line, is bending your rod, pulling on your arm. That's what we call fun, right? When we are fishing. Well, what happens sometime after, 20 minutes, 30 minutes maybe? What happens is you have leverage. The leverage is that, because the line pulls here, but the lift of the fish is there. And this tends to open. And that's why sometimes you lose not the small or medium-sized fish, you lose the one big fish, the one very big fish, the one fish you were dreaming since you were a little kid like this one. You may lose it sometimes because the hook opened. And that's a big part of why I have that idea. And there's the curve. So now when you have the pulling test, when the fish is hooked, the lip is right here and the line pulls there. So what you can see is now the leverage, the energy, the action, if you like, that brings a hook sometimes to open. The leverage is only that, not all the width. And that means you have a much more reliable hook. And I use that on several of my baits. Another big and interesting thing is sometimes, as you know, fish is barely the corner of the lip, right? Well, when you have a regular hook, and of course I'm showing you one of my lure that have other type of benefit, but the lip to the hook point is only that far away. That means the freedom for a fish that's not very well hooked is very close. You know, when there's like a cut in their lip and they shake the head, you just take that little for the hook to go outside and for you to lose the fish. And actually, the inverse curve right here basically double that distance. So that means for the fish that's poorly hooked, which we don't know, you know, you cast the lure, you work the bait, you feel the bite, you set the hook, you never know. Is the hook, deep in the throat, in the tongue, in the side of the sheet, or is it just barely hanging by the lip? You know, none of us knows in advance. But if it does happen, this hook helps to keep the fish on. So that's why that's definitely a lot of the benefit of this guy. And and when I'm talking about trailers, yes, for example, the worm spin, that's one of my soft plastic with hyperlastic, which is that brand with a big red square. So it's a long-lasting soft plastic. We'll go there in 1 second. Understand the time is already going away. But for example, that's a great trailer to put right here. So now you can work on the bottom, and you can see you have the benefits. Look, even if I work very slow, you have the worm spin with that blade that works all the time. So that's one great way to set them together. Now, let's have a look, because time is flying. Let's have a look to the other model. So this one, here. The other model is the swimming bucktail. So it's a shorter, and the wings can go through with a snap here. Yes. So those wings have a more stiffer, if you like, angle. It's a 30-degree angle, roughly. So that's the one that you will like most if you want to do cast and retrieve. Again, we have a wide range: 3/4, 1 ounce, 1.5, 2, 3, 2.5, and 3.5. So that gives lift. So one of the limitations that bucktails have quite often, and I'm sure you know that because you have a rocky shores here, right? So sometimes on a given spot, you need to use, for example, a 1 ounce bucktail. you know, because you know if you reel too fast, you won't have a bite. You need the right speed. But if you go too slow, or if you have a bucktail that's too heavy, you may basically drag on the bottom and you may snag your bucktail, right? So what is one of the key benefits of the swimming bucktail is that the wings here and the width of those wings and the angle of the wings give lift on the water. As a result, you can use typically one size up and sometimes two size up. That means where you're using a regular bucktail of 1 ounce, you can go with 1.5 and possibly 2 ounces. Because the lift, the water lift of those wings will help to compensate their weight. But now when it comes to cast, do you want to cast a 1 ounce or 1.5 ounce lure? 50% heavier definitely makes a difference. And also, you can make better cast into the wind, and also the weight is there, so you feel better your bucktail and it's more efficient. And to finish about that, that's also great lure because the wings also help for better action. And if you see here, when I'm jigging that bait, simply retrieve and jig, and you see the wings also help to make that kind of look. It's very attractive. In that case here, it's a sanded color. The other color have shorter hairs. And I'll give you an idea. So you just can cast and retrieve and use that like every bucktail you know. You can do something also that's unique. And again, the wings make that bait wider than a regular bucktail. As a result, it deflects better when you fish into the rock, which means you're less likely to snag and to lose this bait. All right? Okay, let's move to hyperelastics now. Okay, so hyperelastics, we have the dart spin. We have just a couple of minutes left. So let me show you our best-selling lure right here, right now. So that's named the dart spin. So basically, the dart spin is a design I came with a long time ago, actually. And but I only bring that bait not long ago to market, and it became our best-selling lure with hyperlastic. So what is it? That's a soft plastic body, but that's not your typical soft plastic. You know, most soft plastic are very, very soft. And you see here I have a blade hanging. If it was regular soft plastic, probably will bend like this. But not the material I'm using, which is named Soft Tough. You can see here a logo of Soft Tough. Well, Soft Tough is a material that was designed actually by a company who make high-end bed mattresses. So really not something that was meant to be a fishing lure, but when I read about that component, I was like, I really think that's very interesting. First, no pollutant, zero. And allow me to develop a little bit about that. Many of the soft plastic these days still use phthalates. You know, you just have a drink in your Yeti glass right now. Well, you know, phthalates were forbidden back in 1978 from plastic bottles and baby milk bottles because they were found to create cancer to people. But to this day, the vast majority of the soft plastics are made with phthalates. And every time the line is cut between you and the lure, you know what the lure turns to be? Pollution. It's a lure as long as it's attached to your line. Once it lays on the bottom of the sea or on a beach or somewhere, it's no longer a lure, it's pollution. So one of the things I love about that component was zero pollutant. Zero component that turn into pollution that can harm nature or humans. I love that. But really that's a very unique material. Very interesting, long lasting, resists very well the teeth. That's why you can catch typically several bluefish, like probably 5 times more bluefish than a regular soft plastic. But also because there's more stiffness into that lure. When the blade spin, actually creates energy. That energy transfers to the tail, so the entire lure has vibration. I'm just going to show you this guy in tool size, and I will be done for a moment. But please have a look at this blade. For example, here I rigged it on a 1/4 ounce G-head, so it's great for spoolies, but it's great for many other things. Small mouth, large mouth, I mean, really, you can catch everything with that spin, and we go from very teeny 2.5 to 7 inch. So on a G-head, first thing, of course, you can just cast and simply retrieve.
Nice.
And what you can notice is that not only the blade spins, but you can see the body have vibration. And as I mentioned earlier on today, the eyes of the fish are really important for the fish to adjust for the bite. But most of what turns the fish to bite or to be attracted is really the vibration that you can feel from a prey. Now look, if you gently retrieve this guy, so you can notice that will work all the time, unless you really lay down on the bottom. but that lure works all the time. So that's been 5.5, and to finish I'm going to show you the 7-inch with a wide gap hook so you can see a difference. Good. So same bait here, a quick demonstration about one of the big benefits that the material I use are. It's truly a very tough piece of plastic, and I want to show you this. This gentleman, please can you help us to see? Do you think it's tough? It is truly tough. It is truly tough. And one of the benefits of that material is it allows me, when I make the design, it allows me to put holes and slots in places. So thanks to that, when you want to rig bait, you don't have to hook the plastic itself. You simply follow the different holes and slots depending on the hook or the jig head or the bucktail. They are great, or the bucktail I just showed you, or any regular bucktail. So for example, in that case, if you fish in a place that's a bit shallow, you have some weeds or floating debris, and the stripers are coming there, well, or largemouth bass, well, take the wide gap hook. Again, you're not hooking the plastic, you just go through the holes, that's where it is. You push this way back, and now you take the hook eye, you pull here, and there's a hole underneath the shin. And there you go. The bait is ready to go. And if you have to cast into the weeds, simply open the back, and then push the hook point inside. And now the bait is quite snagless. Now, same type of action, of course, with the benefit of having that wide gap weighted hook. That's why using a jig head, a bucktail, or a wide gap hook just allows you to adjust the type of hook for where you're fishing. This guy, for example, the 7-inch with that wide gap hook, weight 1.5 pounds. Great weight if you want to fish short. So first, again, you can adjust that slow, steady retreat, and you can notice how much the lure itself vibrates, the entire body. And then, sometimes, especially when you have the early light, you know, right before you can see the sun, when you see you start to have some lights around you, it's great to work on the top and to make a wake, like this. It's just fast enough that it's making that wake, and time to time you can see the blade makes one explosion on the top. Stripers absolutely love this.
So you don't have to.
There you go.